And we are back here at 7:07 a.m. And as promised, we have Lubbock City Councilman Randy Christian with us. Good morning, Councilman.
Good morning. How are y'all doing?
Well, about average. What about you?
I think I'm above average.
I've heard that about you.
Well, that's news travels fast. I will tell you that it is nice outside. There's not a breath of wind out there, but there are some slick spots, so please be careful. And I want to immediately take hats off to our folks that are manning our emergency ops center. That's a standard procedure now when we have weather like this, is that the ops center that's over by the fire training facility, they go in there and they've been there all night monitoring all the conditions, managing where we're putting stuff to make it not slick around town, and then coordinating also with TxDOT to make sure that when people get up in the morning, it's relatively safe. You don't need to consider it a green light to go 100 miles an hour on this, but these guys, they rotate shifts out there, and they do their regular job during the day, but they're out there right now. So I think that's really would like to let the citizens know that.
Well, and that's funny because I've got relatives that live in Detroit, and they make fun of us and our winter. In fact, funny story, my daughter married a guy from Buffalo, and they were here a few Christmases ago, and we had a little snow. It was one of those Lubbock snows, probably 3 inches or so. So my son-in-law comes to me that morning, and he says, "Where's your snow shovel? I'll go shovel off the driveway." I said,
"We don't have one?"
I said, "Steve, I don't have a snow shovel." I said, "In fact, there's probably not a snow shovel in Lubbock County."
Well, you know what? I bought one a couple of years ago, and we had about 2 or 3 years ago, we had a monster snow.
Like 15 inches.
Yeah, it was
like once every 40 years.
Up to your knees and above.
Yeah.
And there was a run on snow shovels. Now there's a run on surgical masks. Kind of like that deal.
Yeah, and if the weather forecast is a snowflake is going to fall, perhaps, maybe, sort of, there's a run on the grocery stores. And
oh my gosh, yes. Well, but seriously, we don't have the snow, but we know that the biggest treacherous thing in our neck of the woods is the black ice.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, we don't drive on that. The people up north drive on that stuff all the time. They know how to handle it. We don't.
Well, and they usually have a little snow to add some traction to that.
Yeah. Chains on their tires or something.
Our oldest son lived in around Albany, New York, for a number of years, and it was amazing. It would snow like crazy, but they'd get up and the roads were perfectly clear.
Yeah,
you have to.
They know how to handle it up there.
Well, we just watch the black ice and drive slow.
On another topic, I wanted to bring up. Of course, my wife is a member of Monterey Ambux, and they meet at noon on Mondays. And the new police chief, spoke.
Floyd Mitchell, great guy.
We had him on the show. I really, really like the new chief.
Floyd's a great guy.
I wanted to run that by you. What's the general consensus of the council? And
we talked about him yesterday, but now he'll know that we talked about him yesterday. No, but it was positive. When he first, when I was kind of a funny anecdotal thing, we were talking about Mahomes' deal. When it came down to the 3 finalists for the police chief, we had an open house, and they came and met them all, and I went up to Floyd. And if you look at his resume, he spent most of his career in Kansas City before he came to Texas. And I walked up and didn't know him. He didn't know me, and it was kind of funny because I said, "Well, Floyd, the only reason you really made the top 3 is that you're bound to be a Chiefs fan." And we laughed. He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I had my Kansas City Chiefs shirt on earlier this morning," but he did some security work for the Chiefs and for the Royals. But And when we went through that process and I got the resumes of the 3 finalists, I purposely did not look at their names, and I didn't try to stay away. I didn't know he was Kansas City until afterwards, and I just felt that was a way to look at that and assess who might be the best. And we had some good people, but I just liked what I saw on his resume as far as us moving forward with our police department.
And there's a couple of good stories that I've heard from people that know his heart, and he's just an all around good guy.
Especially if you saw him when we had our tragedies of our first responders.
That's one of the stories I heard.
Oh my gosh, he could barely talk at some of those services, and it was genuine. He would tear up and choke up, and that was a lot. He's had a lot on his plate in a very early time. gosh, what was that? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we had that tragedy hit, and he showed his leadership skills.
Yeah. Well, again, glad you're here. The main reason you're here is there was a city council meeting.
There was?
Last night.
Yeah.
What did you guys do to us?
Well, you didn't watch the show. You don't.
Oh, Channel 12?
2.
Oh, 2? I'm sorry.
It's streamed live on the internet. You don't have to have a TV.
Oh.
Yeah, you need to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So you could have a list of questions. You wouldn't have to ask me, what did you do to us? You'd already know, wouldn't he?
It's true.
Yeah. Well, to dive into that, we had a very short agenda last night. It just was not purposeful, but it just happened so we could get out a little early and make sure that, because I was concerned that we might have to, go slow to get home last night. But I tell you, the most interesting thing for me a lot of times is our work sessions. That's prior to our council meetings and prior to executive sessions when we have staff come in and talk to us about things that are coming up or that are going to be coming up soon, and impact fees that are going to be rolling out. And I don't know if you know what we're talking about. You probably know what we're talking about on impact fees, but it's going to be a new fee that's going to be initiated that's going to be paid by developers. That's going to finally kick in some money as far as infrastructure for completely brand new developments. Most of those, quite honestly, are going to be in 4, 5, and 6 districts. Mm-hmm. But that's the best way to describe the impact fees is, what is that new development, that raw piece of dirt, is there turning it into a housing development? What kind of impact is it going to have on our infrastructure, sewer, water, so on and so forth, and streets too? So there's going to be fees involved that are going to be required by those developers to help pay or offset the costs. But Randy, offset the cost of those.
The first thing that comes to my mind is that we want developers to develop that land because there's going to be a lot of tax revenue that the city is going to derive from the land that is developed with houses and businesses and the sort.
Well, in my opinion, I think it makes sense that they should be a part. That they should have some skin in that part of the game as well too. Is paying for those. So we had our first session at work session about how those are going to work.
Well, what kind of taxes are we talking about?
Some projections of, forget about the money and what it's going to cost. They did like what would it cost a builder for a single unit in their development, which I thought was a way to do it. But what I thought was interesting is to project the growth for us in the next 10 and 20 years in regards to residential and commercial buildings. Then it's amazing what our population is projected to be in the next 10 and 20 years. Wow. It's very, very, it was very interesting. It's more than just dollars and cents regarding the impact fees.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the reason why you need to look at exactly how much it's going to cost per house is because the developer's not going to pay for that. It's the person who's buying the house that's going to be paying for that. So, so the question is, how much more is someone going to pay for a house now because of the impact fees? A brand new house.
It depends upon the house, really. So those kind of numbers, but average house, it might be $5,000. Right?
I mean, that's a pretty good chunk.
Right. But do you want to pay it through taxes, or do you want to build it? It's going to be paid by the taxpayer in some form or fashion.
And so,
in reality,
instead of taking it to votes and having the taxpayers look into it, it becomes a fee, and fees can become outrageous at some point in cities if you're not careful.
So, but how are you going to build that infrastructure for those developments?
Well,
it's going to cost you money, isn't it?
Well,
how have we been doing it?
Quite honestly, we've been the city's been basically picking up the tab on a lot of that stuff.
But they are reimbursed with taxes.
Well, but it's this. Okay, if the city has annexed that area, then it is the responsibility of the city to put those amenities in there.
I disagree with you. I think there's got to be a partnership on those so that you can take the burden off of the taxpayers in a roundabout way.
But the thing about a city is it's
the
going to
builder has a choice. He doesn't necessarily have to add that to the cost of the house, does he?
He's going to.
Does he have a choice, though?
He doesn't have a choice.
Does he have a
if
choice?
He's going to lose money on
Does
the
he
house,
have a choice,
Randy?
though? Does he have a choice?
Hey.
Just answer the question.
Oh, so you're going to have the builder. So, no, let me ask you this. So the builder's
No,
just
you
going
answer,
to
answer my question first.
Yeah, no, he
Answer
doesn't have a choice because he has to
No, he
make the
doesn't.
money.
He has a choice.
He's going to make the money.
Okay.
Does he have a choice?
7:17. Let's take a quick.
Does he have a
break.
choice?
Everybody, take a deep breath, and we'll.
But you're not answering my question.
And we'll be back in a moment. Okay, we're back here on KFYO Mornings with Matt and Dave, and again, Lubbock City Councilman Randy Christian. And, geez, boy, you have opened the box, Randy, when you start talking about adding new taxes. So the money goes to protect the account or the general account.
It's not a tax. It's a fee.
It's a fee.
Well, tax, fee, tax.
It's very different.
I've lived in several different developments, never seen a lack of infrastructure. As typical government speak. That's another texture this morning. Developers have had a free ride for too long.
There's some people that suggest that.
Whomever buys a new home in these developments should have to pay the fees. Why should taxpayers subsidize new developments?
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think the developers do? They actually build roads and then hand them over to the city. They create the roads that are in the development. Do they not?
Some of the curbs.
So they don't pave the roads at all?
No.
I don't know. I
We
will
have
have to double check on that.
A texture that says, Matt, you need to get a grip. You're sounding like Joy Behar.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
It's a simple system that benefits
Okay,
everybody.
now, but again, you're looking at long-term benefit for the city. Why did the city annex so much up north that they didn't really have the money to do the infrastructure for? The fact is that the city they annex people so they can get the long-term benefit of taxes, but now you're annexing and then you expect the developers to pay these taxes. You know what they're going to do is they're going to develop that area and then they're just going to leave it out in the county.
What?
The developers have asked the city council to actually annex areas so that they can be in the city. But now, if it's going to cost $5,000 extra per house, why would they want that development to even be in the city if it's going to cost them more money?
And there have been some people that are out in the county that have requested to be annexed because they want city services.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the big deal.
Yeah.
I
would suggest or guess that that request is probably more so than even the developers in some instances.
Tell us again, what is this fee? What is it called?
It's called an impact fee.
Impact fee. It's basically the impact to the city that developers cause when they create a new neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Streets.
before, the city has been supplying those, and then the city reaps the tax benefit because of all the properties, be it commercial or residential, that's built there, that pays taxes to the city.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So does it look like that this is something that's going to pass, that we are going to do, in fact?
It's already passed, I guess?
No, we just had a work session discussion.
Okay, well,
would we have to,
There's gonna
would
be
the
a-
citizens get to vote on it?
No, there'll be a hearing on it. Last night, what we did is we discussed the impact fees. There will be a hearing on it, a city council hearing, and people can come in to talk about the pros and cons of it. I believe it's March. Forget what date it is. But last night was the announcement and our approval of the open house, open house.
So where did this idea come from?
It's being done everywhere. We're one of the few,
everywhere in like all the big cities.
Midland, Odessa is doing it too.
But most of your big cities are more liberal in the way they do things.
That's not a liberal issue.
It is. It absolutely is. You're talking about fees instead of taxes.
It's a mechanism to pay for these things so we can do a lot of other things across the city as well.
It's a way to get away with taking money from people without raising taxes.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's a business arrangement. It's doing business with doing a business with
It's not a business arrangement if you don't have two people agreeing. Where you're literally saying you're going to pay us this or you don't get to develop. That's not a business arrangement.
They have been working on this and working with the developers for over a year.
Okay, well, we want to hear from some developers.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because we've already been talking to them. And they understand the value of it. They understand the partnership of it. They know that they're for the most part. They're pretty much okay with
it. Sounds kind of like the rich people saying, and I'm not talking about them being rich people, but it reminds me of the rich people coming on saying, I should be paying more money. They just don't do that. All they're saying is, sure, if you want to do that, I'll make the people who are buying these houses pay more money.
We have a texter this morning that says, when are neighborhoods going to have to install their own water wells, police forces, fire departments? Isn't the city responsible for city infrastructure?
We get the water.
Yes.
We get those services to that. We get those services to those developments.
Yeah. Okay. Phew. What do you think? Our text lines are open this morning at 806-680-2790. Back with more in a moment. And we're back at 7:35. Matt and Dave in the morning on KFYO with Lubbock City Councilman Randy Christian. We were talking off mic, Randy, about how fast Lubbock is growing and the problems that it is creating. And I want to put my 2 cents worth in. Lubbock is still, in my opinion, the most livable city that I have become aware of. And I know that it wasn't that long ago we had we're one of America's most livable cities, are we not? According to some surveys, some magazines had taken. But we're talking about financing growth, and so you seem to be telling me that because of the rate at which Lubbock is growing, we're going to have to do some things differently than we have been doing them.
I wouldn't say at the rate. I think we're still at a very reasonable and manageable growth rate that we've been experiencing for a number of years. Will that amp up from a percentage perspective? Yeah. But what I see that our city doing is we're planning for that growth. We're looking at that 10 and 20 years out of saying, here's some projections on where we're going to be as far as residential housing here. And that's what we're talking about today, because if you think about that, that's the foundation of the growth of any city, is how many people are moving into your community and wanting to have a residence, wanting to start a family. And with those residential growth, you're going to have impact fees, infrastructure, things that you're going to be looking at. So you still are not going to have, you're going to have some growth as far as tax base and revenues, but will that ever be enough to facilitate the maintenance, the building of new roads, and like I said a minute ago off air, I'm proud because since I've been on the council, we've set aside enough money to start paving some streets in East Lubbock that have never, ever, ever been paved in the history of Lubbock. So you got to look at that. And there's only just a finite amount of money, and everybody talks about taxes, and then there's a fee, a tax. Well, you could debate that, but you could probably make the argument, and then I will, that it could be looked at as a tax. But there's some of those fees in regards to making sure that we have the funds for infrastructure growth and repair. This is one of the reasons we're looking at the impact.
I'm sorry, but let me break in here. Jacob Estrada, our newsman, has just made me aware that Lubbock Police Department and other first responders are at the scene of multiple car accidents on South Loop 289 near Indiana Avenue. Police are currently diverting all westbound traffic on Loop 289 to exit at Indiana Avenue. Again, all westbound traffic on South Loop 289 is being diverted to Indiana Avenue while police respond to multiple car accidents. So just be advised of that. And if your route to work or your route to wherever you're going takes you by there, you might want to take another route and avoid all of that. And the winter weather advisory is no longer in effect for the South Plains, but there may be black ice in some areas, specifically on highways and overpasses. Just be aware. Okay, sorry to break in there, but that's a report.
That's
breaking
good
news.
To know. I'm sure it has to do with black ice.
So, Councilman, I guess for me, my big thing is, if the city is doing the bare minimum and still doesn't have enough money to do what they're supposed to be doing, then what you're saying is understandable. They have to have more. But when you have a city that's paying $65 million for a building downtown to put everybody in, when you have a city that's doing things like that, they're putting millions of dollars into Market Lubbock and things like that honestly are things that are not in the purview of the city. They're things that the city wants but doesn't necessarily need, but they're saying they don't have the money for the needs. so they're going to get more money. That's when I start having a problem.
You don't want the city to grow? You don't. Back to your comment
I don't
about
think that growth has anything to do with downtown Lubbock.
What downtown Lubbock? So that's where I have an argument with these people that say, well, you just need to abandon downtown.
It's not yours to put money into.
We've got to figure out a way to, in my opinion, this is just my opinion too, is you've got to go back and revitalize. We're always talking about revitalizing certain areas of our city. You've got to have a plan, whether you like that plan exactly as is or not. You've got to have a plan to revitalize our city from the core out. In the core of any city, we can debate, and you don't like that idea, but the core of any city is going to be the center of it, that where all north, south, east, and west communities intersect. So regardless of how much money or how little money you put into a downtown, you've got to have a plan to make sure that it doesn't rot and fall apart and becomes an eyesore and is going to cost you more money and can create an environment for bad things to happen above and beyond just as far as buildings are falling apart. So you cannot look at you got to look at the growth and the development of a city in a very holistic way, in my opinion, from every corner of the city. Here we've got the impact fees that we're talking about for new development, the raw dirt that's not a residential area at all right now. But then you've got to look about how do we maintain the integrity and make sure that our downtown doesn't fall apart. Now, do you have to create some incentives for people to do that in downtown? I don't like all the incentives. I don't like all the plan. I don't like every piece of what we're doing in regards to incentives downtown, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think we have to do something to incentivize people to look at taking an old building and rehab. Look what Texas Tech is doing when we did the groundbreaking on the graduate housing that's going to be across the street from the Civic Center and the Mahon Library. Yeah, there's some private dollars going in there, but
that's all private.
That's good, but you got to have a mix of both in some respects.
Why?
You've got to have a mix of both, especially in a downtown. I could argue with. I just believe that that's what you got to do.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, there has to be. What is there not like something we can do to say, well, maybe we should take the money out of the public out and see what happens? Take the public money out of it and see what happens.
Well,
I like the plan that we've got right now.
I think there's a track record. There's people that's in the business, in the city business, understand and know how it works. The thing is, I'm for revitalizing downtown. I certainly, because once it is revitalized, it'll take off like a rocket.
Exactly.
And there will be a lot of new tax revenue that will come to the city.
Not if they keep saying that they don't have to pay taxes when they move in.
Who does?
Well, you get big companies come in and you give them tax-free for so long to move in. I don't know. I don't know if anybody does specifically. Does O'Reilly's pay taxes?
I'm sure they
do. On their warehouse?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure they do.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you make blanket statements like that, I'd like you to give me some names, address, and phone numbers of people that are getting significant amounts of rebates.
I'll do more research, but I know that Lubbock has jumped into the pool of
there may be some incentives. I'll go back and check on O'Reilly. There may be some incentives, but as far as tax abatements,
let's take a quick break.
That's not the case.
We probably have other things we need to cover after this break. 7:43, and Dave and Matt and Councilman Randy Christian will return after this. And we're back here at 7:48 a.m. Dave and Matt on KFYO with Councilman Randy Christian. Okay, I don't know a time since I've been on this radio show that we have received as many text messages as we have this morning, and I have to apologize.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Oh, by the way, we're having a town hall meeting, so all those people that are texting, they can come to the town hall meeting tonight at 7 o'clock.
Well, this is like a town hall meeting. Only they get the text in. But I did want to say this. Thank you for your text, and I do apologize. There are so many this morning we can't begin to get to all of them. But anytime you talk about taxing or what they consider a new tax, you're going to have a lot of interest in that, Randy.
Are.
But we got other things to talk about too.
I think we needed to talk about them, so that's a good
thing. Brick streets.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about brick streets?
Well, the mayor has asked myself, Councilman Griffiths is the chairman of that subcommittee, and then Councilman Chavez are in that subcommittee. And we have put some miles on some vehicles, and we've driven lots and lots of streets, both north, south, east, and west, and really looked at streets that need or dirt streets that need to possibly be paved, expansion and widening of certain streets based upon what kind of traffic is happening to them right now, what the projections of the traffic for those are. So we've been doing this. We've had 3 meetings on that and tours, and I found it fascinating to drive in some of the areas of town where that have not been annexed, that are older, that have been part of the city for a long time, that the streets are dirt and they houses on them and they've never been paved. Mm-hmm. But then we also looking at what do we do, and we're going to be coming to council in the next week of what we ought to do with those.
I know I had a client that had a warehouse back over there at East Lubbock on King Street in that area, and I in driving to his warehouse, there are areas over there that there are dirt streets, but then it's the lowest of the, what am I trying to say? It's the oldest of our houses. They're very, very small. They're very run down. Mm-hmm. I mean, they haven't been paved ever.
Right.
And they're probably 70 years old. Does it make sense to spend the money to pave them now?
Well, that's something we'll take in consideration. Maybe we just need to do something to help that dirt street be a little better. Maybe that street doesn't need to be paved, but we need to give it some maintenance. We need to do something with it.
So that's what your committee is trying to work out right now.
All of those things would go into the calculation, if you will, of what we do.
Do you feel like that we will replace some brick streets? I know not all of them.
Oh, I think that's possible, yeah. But there's some that and this is me just talking not about my, but you look at some of the streets that they're beyond repair. There are some that are on beyond.
I was telling you off mic, I ran into some over there by the courthouse that just, man, you guys have got to fix that.
Well, they should have been fixed some of those should have been fixed a long time ago. Especially that big dip in front of the federal courthouse that you might as well build a bridge across it.
It needs a bridge across it.
Yeah, but those are the sort of things that we're looking at and finally going to take some action on. It's not anything that we do propose. It's not going to happen overnight. But I do think that we need to honor those people that love the brick streets and have, from a historical perspective, and understand the historical aspect of the brick streets. So I think that we need to reach some compromise on what we do with them, because they can be retooled or redesigned that from an aesthetic perspective that can look very nice as well.
So anything else that we want to cover, although that was covered last night in the city council meeting?
Well, I was just happy to hear about that we've got some that Matt Dawson is doing somewhat better, that he's not in he's in a ICU bed now. The eyes are open. There's some response to them. He's got a long haul, but that was positive news about him. As well, mentioned the EEOC. Really, it wasn't a particularly, in my opinion, I said the most interesting and most valuable information that we received was in our work session, and not necessarily our regular session. It was pretty cut and dry as far as regular session is concerned.
So again, y'all are having a town hall meeting tonight.
Correct.
You and Councilwoman Latrell Joy will be, where is that going to be in time again?
We are going to be at Lubbock Christian Schools, the auditorium, which is the new main entrance to the schools. I believe that's the elementary entrance is to the south of the auditorium, but it's well marked. It has auditorium, and that's on Dover. Lubbock Christian Schools is right across the street from Hayes Field, where LCU plays baseball. It's very easy to find.
Let's take a quick break, Randy, and then we'll come right back and close things out after this. And we're back. Dave and Matt and Randy Christian, Lubbock City Councilman. And once again, you're having like a town hall meeting?
Town hall meeting tonight, 7 o'clock, Lubbock Christian Schools. Is right across the street from Hayes Field, LCU's Hayes Field. Can't miss it. It's Dover. I don't remember the...
Dover and 19th, right around there.
Well,
right?
It's south of 19th. It's on the south side of the LCU campus across the street from there. But I know we only have a short period of time, but one of the things that for me personally is important is for how do we continually unite West Texas from a political perspective? And because we got a session next year. What do we do to come together as West Texas in a region so that we're united on causes that we know are important to this entire region and not just Lubbock? I think that's so important as we move forward, and I think Tech has a lot to do with that. And when we have the veterinary school, I think that really started the ball rolling even more.
Yeah.
Randy,
always glad to have you guys out and talk city business. It's been interesting this morning, I'll tell you for sure.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't, but I want to quickly just thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers. I've been struggling with my most recent cancer battle, too. And I appreciate that very much. Yes. And I'm going to send Matt a Valentine's.
So nice.
Dr. Skubnik is next. So stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this.